Hi everybody, this is Allison from the Sachem Public Library with video 2 of 2 in our Career Pathfinder series. Today we're going to focus on resume help and our interview skills. So we're going to focus on how to write a good resume and work on your interviewing skills. I'm going to show you some databases and some websites that'll be helpful for you to build that resume and to work on your interview skills. Now, we also have a career counselor here in the library. His name is Richard Gluck, and you can make an appointment with him by emailing him at rcgluck0120@yahoo.com to make a virtual appointment with him. Now, we're going to go to research and databases. The first one we're going to look at is one that we have seen if you've watched the previous video, which is Brainfuse. Believe it or not, they do have adult learning help. So for people who are looking for careers, adult learners, Brainfuse has you covered. So, writing a winning resume. Let's click on that. So it gives you a couple of different resources. So examples and resources, you can get some one-on-one help, and you can discuss once you have received your resume, you can get some live help on Brainfuse. So let's look at the online resources. The other two are going to be more of an in-person one-on-one submitting your resume. Now, there's a bunch of different templates for resumes. Not everybody's resume looks the same, and thank God for that, because if every resume looked the same and somebody had to sit through the same resume, that would get incredibly boring. And even though not everyone's look the same, it probably does get pretty boring. So how do we make your resume a winning resume? How do we really make it stand out? Let's look at a couple of these templates and get an idea of what a good resume is going to look like. So just going to allow that to download. So this is an example of a resume that might get you that job. So our full name, phone number, email, LinkedIn. I know that there are some people who don't have a LinkedIn. They may not use it. I recommend it. Put your LinkedIn info there, and then if you have your own website or a digital portfolio, your portfolio isn't just for somebody who's an artist, it's for anybody who has any sort of work that they want to show off to future employers. Have all that in one space so that way you have a portfolio to show them. So we have our profile, and it gives us an explanation of what should be there. So the standard objective that used to be included on resumes is outdated. So obviously there has been a progressive change with how resumes are written. So now you recommend a profile or a headliner. Instead, an example of which is shown above. So award-winning, conscientious finance major adept in determining timely solutions to challenging situations using superior communication skills. One sentence. It gives you a couple of different highlights of the skills this person has, what they've done, without it being too verbose. Next is your education, so where you got any of your degrees from. I've also gotten the advice that if you've ever been on the dean's list, definitely put that on there, and what semester. So the position of this section can be moved around on a resume depending on the relevance. Sometimes if your education is important, you do want to have that towards the top, but if it's something that may not matter, so if maybe you're moving up in a company, then your education, they already know it, it's not the most important fixture of your resume. Then you have awards and recognitions. So if you received any sort of award for anything that you've been in your career. So this awards and recognition section allows you to provide the potential employer with more information related to your prior success. So whatever success you did have in the past, possibly relating to whatever field you want to move up in, put your awards and recognitions in there. Then we have professional experience. So this is where you're going to put all of the experience you have depending on what your job was. So the Olive Restaurant in Florida, hospitality coordinator. So these bullet points are basically your duties. But it's not just simply, oh, I planned events or I answered phones. you want to get as much information in there as possible, again, without it being too verbose. So, promoted from certified trainer to hospitality coordinator to provide all aspects of operational support to the senior management. Tells me exactly what they did, how they moved from a trainer to a coordinator, and what they did when they changed from trainer to coordinator. Quickly analyze and troubleshoot stressful and challenging situations to ensure client satisfaction. So I know there that they know how to analyze a situation, think about different solutions, and be able to deal with a challenging environment and also keep the satisfaction of clients, which means that they are somebody who's quick on their feet and they're somebody who has good personal and interpersonal skills. So they've also broken it down as a certified trainer, bartender, server. What did they do there? It's the same thing. You're breaking things down into each one of your duties, but making sure that you're also highlighting the things you did. So the experience section is the most important part of a chronological resume. Most of your accomplishments and duties in the previous jobs will be listed here in chronological order. This section is you need to be sure to focus on what sets you apart from other candidates. So somebody else might put in, can work in stressful situations. But if you put quickly analyze, troubleshoot stressful and challenging situations to ensure client satisfaction, I might be more inclined to choose that over somebody who just says can work stressful environments, because you're giving more of a specific of what do you mean by a stressful environment? What did you do about the stressful environment? You want to make yourself stand out. You want to be able to sell yourself in your resumes. Then we have leadership and activities. So if you were the president of something, if you're a member of another club, and then computer skills. Now, obviously, some of these things are going to be different depending on the type of job you are going to be going for. But you always want to have your skills on here. It's not just limited to just computer. It's also can just be your skills in general. What kind of computer skills do you have? Do you have interpersonal skills? Can you work in a team? Are there any languages that you know besides English? What kind of skills have you learned in other places that you can put down in here that might set you apart from another candidate? This is good really for any resume. You always want to make sure that you are selling yourself, you're highlighting all your successes. Don't let this be the time where you are humble about it. If whatever accomplishments you've had, whatever successes you've had, make sure that they are there and they are highlighted, and that you are able to take that and bring that into the interview, which we will talk about in a little bit. So then we have a bunch of other templates for resumes. So if you wanted to write a different type of resume, if you are somebody who is a veteran entering the civilian workforce and you need to know how to write a resume for that, they have that here for you. If you are looking for a combination resume, a functional resume, a career one-stop resume guide. So if you just want a good guide to get a jump start on how to get the resume you have in order that's going to be good for today's market, the resume guide is the thing for you. Now, besides Brainfuse, we do have career cruising, which is something I touched upon before about resumes. So what you would do for this is to either upload your resume, you can edit your resume, you can add your references. If you're somebody looking for a job, they most likely will ask for 3 references, usually professional. And you can edit all of this here, and if you're looking for a career objective, your education history, your work experience. So you can go ahead and add your work experience. You're building your resume here. So the company that you're at, what position, where it is. So everything we just saw from the last database All of that information you're plugging into here, which will help build the resume and make it look more polished. If you have anything additional to your work experience, let's say attach whatever reference you need to or whatever files you need to in order to make yourself stand out in that resume. You can also look over here. So now I want to go to skills and ability. I want to add some skills that I have. Or here's my awards and certificates. I'll add them here. And this way, when you have it all together, it really helps to bolster up that resume. And it also helps you to think about, okay, well, what are my hobbies and my interests? And are they going to be relevant to what I'm doing? Or how could I make my hobbies and interests relevant to this position? How could I use it to my advantage? Same thing with your extracurricular activities. How could you make them more relatable to whatever position you're going for, or how do they relate to it already? It's always important to think about what you have, what you're interested in, what you know how to do, and how you can take that and put that into a job to make you stand out from other people. Now, the last thing I'm going to show you for this one is ZipRecruiter. So I think some of you might be familiar with ZipRecruiter for searching for a job, but they do have some resume help. So I'm just going to view some templates. Again, it's same as the other resource. We have chronological, functional, which is great for education focused, functional, which focuses on your skills. So remember how that education didn't have to particularly be in that place. So now I want something that's going to be education focused. So best for recent grads. So if you are a recent graduate, this might be a good resume for you. So this one is a little more simpler. This one definitely would fit somebody just graduating college. So we have our education first, because we just graduated. We want to show off where we graduated from. Our GPA, that might be very important. Awards, clubs, dissertations, again, if you're on the dean's list, put that on there. Our type of degree, when we graduated. Next is going to be our skills and awards. That's going to be our second most important thing, is the skills. What kind of skills do you have? Then we have training and certificates, and then experience. So this one, experience is important. It may not be as important for recent grads. Not everybody has as much experience when they're just graduating college. Though today I feel more and more students have worked jobs prior to college and have worked for a long time. So having that experience, your company, what did you do, what were your responsibilities and achievements. Just because this one is a little more simple doesn't mean that you should downplay your duties and your roles and what you did in your company if you have that experience. Don't ever downplay what you've done. It's always important to highlight your successes and to highlight the duties that you did do. Okay, the last thing that I'm going to show you is the interview skills help from Career Cruising. So we've looked at this before to explore interests, to find jobs, to build a resume. Now we're going to go to employment. And over here, interview skills. Now, some of you may have never been on an interview before, whether it be for a school or for a job. Some of you may have been on a bunch of interviews, and some of you maybe just a few of them, and you've gotten the job each time. That's awesome. But we're going to look at the purpose of an interview, first impressions, and more. So, what is the purpose of the interview? Kind of self-explanatory. They want to learn about you. We want to get some extra information besides what's on your resume, and it gives you an opportunity to tell the person who you are. So first impressions, obviously very important. Everybody knows that the first impressions, you can't make another one. So it really does matter. So consider whenever you're going for an interview, your work environment, the company you're going for. You want to look the part. You want to look for the job that you want to have. You dress for that job. You want to make sure that you're on time. You want to make sure that you have your extra copies of your resume. You want to make sure that if they want a portfolio from you, or if it's something that you provided, you have a physical copy of it. You never know how many people are going to be interviewing you. You may think it's just a one-on-one. Next thing you know, you have 3-4 people in front of you asking you questions. They may have not seen your portfolio, your resume. You can give that to them. Then we have interview prep. So both of these seem very easy, but they're a little more complicated than you might think. So knowing yourself. How are you in high pressure situations? So now we have the interview prep. So knowing yourself and knowing the company or the organization that you want to work for. So how do you perform under a high pressure situation? Do you have the right people skills? Can you talk to somebody one-on-one, or can you talk to a group of people? How do you talk about yourself? Are you going to be just kind of winging it, or are you going to be a little more prepared, referring to your resume, your portfolio? It's always important to practice your interview. I recommend doing it with a friend or a parent, somebody. And I also would recommend going online and just looking at questions they might ask in a blank position. So for a librarian's job, for a teacher's job, and you can find hundreds of questions that have been asked and kind of skim through it and think about your answers. So after you have figured out, okay, I know myself, I know what I want to talk about, I know what I want to highlight, now think about the company. It's really important to be familiar with the company that you're gonna be interviewing for. So if you wanted to work for a school, but you knew nothing about the school, they're gonna know that in the interview process. So best idea is to research the school. How many students does it have? What are their demographics? What are their grades like? Who are the members on their board? Who's the superintendent? Who's the principal? You know, how many teachers do they have? All of that information could possibly come up in your interview, or you could use that knowledge to your advantage. You could say, well, I know you have X amount of students, and add on whatever information you want to after that. But having that information beforehand will be remembered by the interviewer and go, oh, well, clearly they researched our school district. They know what we're working with. They seem invested. Then you're more likely to be chosen for a position or for a follow-up interview. Now the questions. Now there could be thousands and thousands and thousands of questions that you could be asked on an interview. So behavior-based questions. As somebody who's been through a bunch of interviews, I know that tell me a time about, describe a situation, give me an example, recall an instance when, those have all been asked of me in interviews. Tell me about a time where you had to deal with a difficult child. Describe a situation in which two teens are fighting and how do you deal with that situation. Give me an example of a time where you had to help somebody that you didn't think you'd be able to help. Recall an instance when you remember feeling like you really helped somebody. Whatever the question may be, you need to be prepared for whatever it's going to be and have a couple of different options. They also might ask you how you work under pressure. Can you think creatively? You know, if you need to make an unpopular decision, can you do that? If you want to work, let's say in education, how do you deal with children with special needs? Have you ever worked in a diverse community? Where have you worked previously where you've seen situations similar? How did you handle this? How would you handle that? It's all about thinking about what could they be asking. Now, all of these common-based questions, these ones are asked a lot. So, can you adapt to a difficult situation? Think about that job. Think about what situation it might be. Can you adapt to it? And when you're answering these things, you're not just going to say yes. You're going to elaborate a bit, but not too long. So, answering the behave questions. 70 seconds. Identify the skill and the knowledge or the ability. Give an example of how you applied whatever that skill was, or developed it by explaining who, what, when, where, why, how, and what the successful outcome was. And then 20 seconds to restate the skill, outline the benefits transferable to the interview's organization. So I think I mentioned this before. You always want to think about how whatever you're saying, whatever you're doing, whatever you have, your interest, whatever it is, how it's going to relate to that organization, to that company, to whatever it is. How is what you have going to benefit them? How are they hiring you? How is that going to benefit that company? What can you bring to the table? Situational, hypothetical questions, they're going to pop up all the time. If you had kids fighting, how do you deal with that situation? If you have an angry parent on the phone, how do you deal with that situation? If you have somebody who may be in trouble, maybe you notice some certain behaviors, what do you do? Now, that's not going to be asked in every single one, but those are questions that might be asked in a wide variety of different careers or in different jobs. So they have examples here. If you'd met your project deadline and your direct supervisor was unavailable, describe how you would remain busy. So if you have finished all of your work, what would you do until your supervisor was available in order to keep yourself busy? So that way you're not just sitting around not doing anything. You're the manager of a small marketing team and somebody's late all the time, they take extended breaks. How do you approach the issue? What do you do? Think about realistically what's going to be the best option. Now, these skill testing questions, those are going to be specific to whatever job you're going into, whatever that position is going to be. So there might be some jargon in there that you're going to have to know before you get in there. So if they said, what is a comma splice? And you don't know what a comma splice is, you might be in a little bit of trouble. If they said, what is the difference between server-side and client-side scripting, and that is something you've never heard of before, might be in a bit of trouble. So going back to you doing research on that organization, if you see those terms around and you're not sure what they mean, look it up. When you go into that interview, you will be much more prepared, because if you get interviewed and somebody throws you that question about client-side scripting and you know what it is because you took the time to do that research, but the person after you didn't and had no idea, who might have the upper hand in that situation? Then we have problem-solving questions. So when answering problem-solving questions, you want to demonstrate your ability to process information quickly. So thinking on your feet, thinking logically, you're solving a problem. So estimate the size of a DVD rental market in Tokyo, Japan. That might be a question for you. Describe how you would extract caffeine from coffee beans. The key is not to worry about getting the right answer, which is true. You don't want to just think about, is this right or is this wrong? You want to demonstrate your logical thought process for solving the problem. They want to know that you know how to get from A to B to solve the problem. They want to know your thought process. And then we have classic questions. There's a ton of classic questions that are possibly going to be in an interview. You know, what motivates you to do a good job? Classic, what are your strengths and weaknesses? That one is a very common one. Think about the things you're good at and think about the things that you know you need to work on, but things that you know that if you were to be in this company, to join this team, that you could work on, that you know you would have to work on, things that you know you can get better at by being at this place. You know, what are your plans for further studies? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do you see yourself in 10 years? Why should you be hired? How do you spend your spare time? What are your hobbies? You know, how do you handle pressure? What do you like to do? There's a lot of basic questions, but also some that take a little bit more thought. You want to make sure you answer them honestly, effectively, and you're actually answering the question. Don't dance around it. If you're not sure, don't ramble on until you kind of find the point. And then they're answering classic questions, the pause model. So the profile, mention how you became interested in the field, your academic, talk about your education, your work, highlight paid or unpaid experience, and your skills. So if you want a good way to remember these questions, pause is a good model. Think about the profile of who you are, talk about what you've done academically, your work, and your skills. Then we have tricky situations. So things that might be a little more awkward to talk about. Salary is one of the most awkward things that you could ask for. So if a job does not specify, or if they want to know what salary you think you deserve, that could be a bit of a tricky situation. So if you're applying for something short term, you will likely have only one interview. So it is acceptable to discuss the salary. For full-time, you may inquire about salary during the first interview to see if your expectations are compatible with what they're offering. Seeing how much they value the experience you have, your education, your background, who you are, and then defer from that topic. But if the employer does insist, be prepared to offer a salary range you know is realistic based on research. So what I would do in this case is look at salaries to go back to OOH, Occupational Outlook Handbook. Look at the median pay grade for whatever job that you are looking for. What is it? Do you have all the educational requirements? Do you have the certifications and licenses? Do you have previous experience? If you do, then you would probably qualify for that median range. If you don't, then reconfigure what you think the right salary would be. We're going on to if there's silence during the interview. To answer a question and there is no prompt, response, or follow-up, what do? Remain calm, stay collected. It's not always a negative thing. The interviewer might be taking notes, they might be thinking of the next thing. Sometimes they have a sheet in front of them with questions, so they're writing down your answers as you're going. So don't be afraid to let that silence sit for a second after you've given your answer so they can write down what you're saying. If you're stumped, don't fret. Just remain calm, remain positive, kind of focus on that question. It's okay to ask, can you ask that again? Don't be afraid to ask them to repeat the question. You may need to hear it again to make sure that you've got it and you think about it. Sometimes you just need to take a minute, think about that question. If you want, don't be afraid to ask the interviewer, hey, can you repeat that question? And they'll repeat it for you. Think about what your answer is going to be, and you can give your answer. Sometimes you may say, can we come back to that question? It's something I'd like to think about. And most likely they'll go, okay, and then come back to it. But make sure that you are thinking about it. And if they ask a question about a skill you don't have, you can demonstrate how whatever skills you do have can transfer to that position or transfer to that skill. So you may not know this one program, but you've worked with a program very similar to this and you're a quick learner. So this would be a program you could easily learn in a day. You don't want to give a negative answer. And if you have a negative question, so interviewers will often ask negative phrase questions to assess your perceived weakness and strength. So an example is, what are your weaknesses as an employee? Recall a time from your work experience when you made a bad decision. Give me an example of a time you did not meet a project deadline. Be honest and discuss a real work-related weakness. Like I said, you don't want to have avoid the I'm a perfectionist. That is what everybody says, and 90% of the time it's not really true. Let's be honest with ourselves. We just want to make sure that your weak response for your weakness ends on a positive note. So I had a difficult time when this happened, but I learned from this experience to do this for next time. End on a positive. So whatever negative question you get, make sure you end it on a positive note. So these were all the tricky questions, those sticky situations that you might be in during an interview. Then you have your rights. So what are your rights during the interview process? All the things that are important. Your communication skills. Now, questions you can ask, I feel like this one is important to just focus on for a minute, because sometimes we feel like we go into an interview and we did a really great job, and then the interviewer goes, "Do you have any questions for me?" And this might be something you did not think about, and you are a deer in headlights. This is why you're doing the research beforehand. So you do have to come up with your own questions. It is important to come up with things that are going to be relevant to the position you want to go for or for the company. But there are some example ones. So something like, describe a typical day on your job. What do you see as the greatest threat to the organization? What are the company's plans for the future? You can ask questions like that. Don't be afraid to also ask questions. Now, we've seen the types of resumes. Now we have types of interviews. So I was talking about it before, where you can have an interview with 2 or more people. You can have a general group interview or information session, a competitive group interview, phone, video, and then the second interview. Sometimes it is not said what kind of interview you're going to have. Obviously, if it's something on the phone or a video, you'll know that, but you're not going to know how many people are going to be there, if there's going to be somebody else. Be prepared for it all. The interviewed approaches, and then ending your interview. When you're ending your interview, you want to make sure that you have highlighted all of the points that you wanted to highlight, that the interviewer understood everything that you were saying. You can ask a question if it hasn't been asked yet. If they haven't said, "Do you have any questions?" Ask them a question, and then you can ask when you might hear a decision, and then remember to thank them. Thank you for the opportunity, and I hope to hear from you soon. And then there's always a good follow-up in the next day, 2 days, to send an email, thank them for the opportunity again, express your enthusiasm for the position, and can't wait to hear from you. Something like that. Keeping it light, keeping it positive. And then we look at the interview evaluation. So what's great about career cruising is that when you come to the interview evaluation, when you come to just this one here, after you've gone on an interview, what you can do is go and complete the interview evaluation worksheet, where you can fill in all of the information about the interview. And you just keep doing that with every interview that you have. You can kind of compare how you did on certain interviews, the questions that were asked. It's really great practice and is a good way to log all of your interview information. Now, if you didn't receive the position, you can always ask them, was somebody more qualified for the position? What were some things that you think I need to work on? What were the things that maybe I could have done differently? Get some feedback from them. Don't be afraid to ask for that feedback. And then, of course, we have the job offerings on Career Cruising, where you can search for jobs. So then we have job offers, where you're just evaluating the offer that you're given, and then all the things that you should consider before accepting or declining a job. So these are all the things. It kind of looks like a job description. So you're thinking about all of that, and then on the job, so then once you get the job, you can start going through the process of before you arrive, starting it, the beginning, long-term success, and when it does not fit. So if you feel like this job was really great in the beginning, and then after being there for a little while, it is not fitting with what you thought it was going to be, or you have made changes within yourself, or you want to make changes in your career or yourself, and this job isn't right for you, that's okay. Understand that changing your career, changing the path you want to go on is okay. So this is the end of this series, the Career Pathfinders. I hope that you enjoyed this series. I hope that I've made it a little bit easier for you to do some job searching and to feel a little more confident once you search for a job and you get an interview, and you can go in there a little more confident, knowing a little bit more, and really land the job. So I hope you enjoyed this and you could use this information in your future.